The contract was unethical. It was unethically taking advantage of people. But the feeling that I was having, the feeling that I couldn't quite identify, was shock. So would you put that up? Do you mind? I was feeling shock. And I asked the Lord actually what it was, and he said shock, and I'm like, I don't even know what shock is. Like, shock, like, you know? And I was like, am I afraid? And I even I Googled it, I'll admit it, I Googled it. Anybody have a good definition of shock? Like, I know what it is as a former EMT, you know, you're in shock, but, you know, emotional shock.
You said like surprise.
Yeah, surprise, yeah. It's when you are trying to hold two disparaging thoughts, concept, it's kind of like, oh, I'm sorry, what's the word for it?
Shock of wheat.
Oh, a shock of wheat. Kind of like a shock of wheat, but also slightly different. What's the word for when you're holding two opposing concepts?
Paradox.
Yeah, thank you, like a paradox. So shock is what happens when you encounter that. When you can't reconcile two things that seem irreconcilable. So if you would put that like irreconcilable, and I don't know, this might be super ministering to someone, but you know, maybe we'll move that on over. So how many times have we experienced shock in our relationship with God? Right? Right? We believed one thing and then our life went another direction. Shock. How many times in relationships did we believe one thing or somebody said one thing and it went differently? That's shock. In fact, you can have, from now I've discovered, PTSD, so you can have your brain permanently locked into a fight or flight or fear mode, frozen and fear mode, from shock. Because you couldn't reconcile the disparaging or, you know, opposite thingies. I'm trying to come up with the D word and I can't come up with it. It's like paradox, but it's a D word. And thank you, dichotomy. The dichotomy of the two things, right? So this affects, like, right, mental health. So anyway, so the Lord showed me I have shock. And it was really interesting because somebody had ministered to me years ago and had kind of asked the Lord, what is one of the earliest woundings that I had experienced? And we felt like it was shock, which also was shocking because I was like, well, what's that? Like as a 2-year-old, I was like, frightened, you know? Like what? I don't know what that is. But it was just interesting and we just asked for the Lord to heal that. But here this word is coming up again, right? And so in prayer with a couple of other people who are here in this room, thank you so much, Kathy, Carey, I felt the Lord brought another word to me. And he said, the reason why this is so challenging for you, this shock, is because it's representing duplicity. Duplicity. And that's not a word I use. Anyone use that word often? Like, it's not even a vocab word for Darby, because normally when I use words, she's like, that's my vocab word. But duplicity was the word. And all of a sudden I went, yes, that is when somebody says one thing, but they do something different. That's duplicity, right? So I looked that up because I felt the Lord say, yes, pursue that. And the word that triggered some sort of emotional response in my body when I looked it up was the word duplicate. Duplicate. When somebody is a duplicate of themselves. They might even believe that they're that duplicate, but they act this other way. And I went, that is the wounding of my life. That is the challenge when somebody does one thing. And so I kept processing that, and I felt like the Lord was saying to me, here's the thing that causes you to be so challenged by this. You value what people say so much that you almost want to ignore what they do. You have elevated people's verbal commitments or verbal statements to the point that you're shocked when they don't do what they say they're going to do. And I saw a picture of myself walking into this meeting with these builders, and I had this, I don't know if I can describe this quite, but do you know how you like see yourself as another person, kind of like maybe when you're in a dream state? I saw myself walking in the room and I was so naive and open. And I realized, let me see where I'm at on time. Okay, I realized that in my naiveness and openness, there was a need. So it wasn't just naive, open childlikeness. There was a naive, open neediness. And it was that I needed for people to be who they say they are. Because then I feel safe, right? And when they aren't, I am shocked. And it almost puts me into a mental state where I can't think or function. And then I'm trying to wheel myself out of this state of shock because they don't behave the way that they said they would. Like, I'm sorry, but duh. Like, duh. But literally, there's a part of me that doesn't know how to grapple with this. And it's the wounded part of me that hasn't been able to get over the hurt that occurred. And so I realized, well, this has been my journey all this year, right? I've been actually pursuing this for multiple years, but this whole year proclaiming over mental health, this is one of the wounds that I have. In processing relationally with other people, it is, people don't always do what they say they're going to do, and people aren't always who they believe that they are. And so I saw that the Lord was showing me, like, you could walk into this room with these same people and see them as they are. Now, let me just be clear. I want you all to know, I used to be super, super hypercritical of people. I know some of you don't believe that, but you knew me then, right? So true, right? Super, super, super critical of everything and super suspicious. And then the Lord shifted my perspective, and I was learning how to agree with him about people. So what I did was I flipped the coin. I flipped the wounding. But it didn't put me into health. So if that makes any sense. So one wounding just turned into a different, it was a beautiful thing and probably a necessary part of the journey, but it wasn't healing the deeper wound. So flipping to not just believing negative things about people, but seeing people as God sees them, that's a good necessary part. But it didn't heal the hurt of needing them to be that. Does that make sense? And so needing them to be that kept me in the illusion or the delusion that they would be who they thought they were or be who they said they were. And then every time they weren't, I could not reconcile the reality. Couldn't reconcile it. And then I'm all hurt and I'm all disappointed and I take it all personally. Because why? Because my whole foundation, my whole sense of structure, my whole sense of well-being has just been shaken by you just messing up. Because then I want it to all be about me, because if I can fix it, then I can be safe again. So these are things I didn't realize about myself, and this is a huge shift for me in mental health and relationship, is the Lord going, let me heal this hurt. Let me heal, and if you don't mind putting it up, disappointment and discouragement and the ongoing wounding that we carry with us when people aren't who they say they are, or they don't do what they say they're going to do. And then most importantly, what do we do with the ongoing trauma of God not being who we think he's supposed to be? And I say ongoing trauma because it actually is an ongoing trauma. Except for when he starts to show us who he really is, and we no longer need him to be something that he's not choosing to be in that situation. So we'll continue next week about that part of it, which is when we have those places that we can't seem to move or shift that are frustrating. It's a marriage, it's a parental relationship, it's a kid relationship, it's those spaces. And we ask the Lord, this is, you have not shifted, moved, made me able, given me capacity. Maybe it's the career thing, maybe it's finances or whatever. And he just doesn't seem to be showing up in that space in all the ways that we're expecting. And he doesn't move it in the ways that we want. Then the question is, well, who are you really being here? What opportunity exists here that wouldn't exist if this was not immovable? What opportunity exists in this space? And that's the place where he wants to meet us. And he wants to heal us of the hurts of the past, especially the hurts of where we've been taught something about who he is, and then we trusted in that. We had faith in it, right? We believed in it, and then we're greatly disappointed because God wasn't good. And isn't that the greatest disappointment of all? Is not seeing God's goodness in our own journey and story and in our past. So that's just a little piece of mine. I think the Lord's continuing to just kind of unfold and reveal. I hope that it blesses you. Thanks for letting me take the risk on sharing the words too. And then you guys are up.